I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have roll call, please?
Chairman Matthew Poplar.
Here.
Member Todd McClary. Let the record show that Member Todd McClary is absent from today's meeting. Member John Eric Hoover.
Here.
Member Denise McKenzie. Present.
We have approval of the minutes of the April 25th meeting. Okay, we'll do one at a time.
Sorry. Move to approve the 4/25/2024 club meeting minutes.
Second.
Yeah, a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Can I have a motion for the May 28th club meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. Okay, so you guys have to work in tandem here.
You got to vote too, by the way.
I know. But by me not saying anything, I voted no.
No. Silence is acceptance.
Yes. Okay, comments from the general public. There's none that have signed up. I'll look over at our only attendee. Okay, there's no interest there. Comments from the city manager and committee members. Start with you, Drew.
I have none. Time.
None, and I have keep right along.
Yes, sir.
So first item is a recap of the findings from the Imagine Cody River Planning Project. Should have been there. Yeah. Well, no, I don't think we had the right thing there.
Ashley has the presentation, so I know that you both have watched it. I don't know if we want to go through it quickly for you, or what's your preference for that?
I mean, just a brief overview, I think, would be
Okay. Hey, can you turn your microphone on? Sure.
thanks.
You made it.
Welcome.
Me, myself, and I have three others. We started.
Yeah, we already started, but even though we've moved on, do you have any comments?
No.
None? Okay.
Yeah.
We are on the presentation of findings of the Imagine Cody River Land.
Okay.
Okay.
Tammy Verona Consulting, Safety Harbor. So we'll just kind of flip through really quickly.
Not that fast, sorry.
Are we ready? Okay. So this is the presentation that was given to the city council at the meeting on the 4th, right? The 4th? Is that right? No.
11th.
The 11th. Okay. That was a different meeting. So this is just the overview of what we went through. So we can go to the next one. Planning area, which you're familiar with. Next, please. This was the sort of a recap of the 1998, well, it's the Waterfront Overlay District, I guess, but I think that this is from the Waterfront Overlay District, so it's sort of the objectives of that. Okay, go to the next one. This was a board that was shown at the open house, so it just kind of showed the timeline from 1998 when the focus planning for the area started and where we are today with looking at the vision and whether or not it needs to be refreshed. Next, please. So in a vision, we look at where we are now and where we want to be. And then the third thing is how do we get there? But this particular effort just goes as far as this. Go to the next one. So we had our community engagement, which included the survey. This was a board from the meeting. Let's go to the next. So we ended up having 766 responses, and of those responses, 536 were from city residents, or that's what they indicated in the slide, or excuse me, in the survey, and that was 70% of the total responses. If you take into consideration, I don't know if anybody under the age of 18 took the survey, but if we're looking at people who could vote, potentially, about 19% of those 500 and, the survey response was 19% of the city population that's age 18 and up. And then the population that I used was the Beaver for last year, it's the latest that's available, 3268. And your age 18 and over population is 2826. So it's about 86.5%. And that's per the 2022 American Community Survey, because Beaver doesn't do those breakdowns. So I guess what we're trying to show here is that this, in my experience, my very long planning experience, I'm also an expert for the statewide public involvement for the Department of Transportation. So we talk about how to get information out to the community and to get participation. And I can tell you that 19% response rate with considering city residents is exceptional. Let's go to the next, please. So those 30% that were not city residents, I'm going to have to bring mine up because I won't be able to read all that. Some of the responses, they said, I go on my boat in Port Richey, I'm a business owner, I'm a commercial property owner, I used to live in Port Richey, I work on a charter boat there, I spent a lot of time in this area, this is my closest city, so I feel like it's their area, it's super important. So a lot of different types of people who participated in the survey, and in most cases, because the area was really important to them. So for the vision statement, I went through the survey, and there were a lot of open-ended questions, including what's your vision for the area in the next 10 years. So I did a little synthesis of that. The synthesis was the community values careful, sustainable development that enhances public spaces, preserves natural areas, and maintains the small town character of Port Richey. High density and high-rise residential development is not preferred, and there was a strong emphasis on improving infrastructure and ensuring that any new projects benefit the broader community. So next was the question 2. Which building use types are appropriate? We had those single-use type buildings, which go to the next one. You can see little thumbs, hopefully. As you recall, when we all reviewed the survey together, these were the typologies: shops and restaurant buildings, hotel resort buildings, office buildings, multifamily buildings, single-family and two-family buildings, and mixed-use buildings, which may include retail, restaurant, office, and or residential uses. So this is for the waterfront 1 area. So we segregated this question into 3 parts. And you can see from the green, blue, and yellow lines, that shows preference, that shows that those types of uses are appropriate, that the survey takers thought that the use was appropriate for the area. And then if you see the orange, purple, and pink, that's inappropriate, and the turquoise and aqua is either one, it's just neutral. So in waterfront 1, there was a preference for the shops and restaurant buildings, and then a little bit more for the mixed use buildings. But the other types of buildings were not as preferred. And I will tell you that some people who took the survey said there should be nothing that changes out there. So they were kind of like, they used the other category. So we'll talk about that in a second. So people had the option, if they didn't really want to respond to this, they could provide whatever they thought was. And a lot of them said, don't touch it, don't do it. So there's some of that going on in this as well. So go on to the next one. This is for waterfront 2. And you'll see again, preference for the shops and restaurant buildings, a little bit more for the mixed use buildings, and hotel resort had a little bit more play there. I also see single family and two family has a little bit more weight there. And then the last one is US 19 corridor on the next slide. And again, shops and restaurants were appealing. And then also the mixed use Hotel had a little bit more than any of the other two areas. And then office buildings also had a little bit more activity there. But the multifamily buildings did not receive as high preference. So if we go to the next slide, these are the other comments, the open comments. So the synthesis showed the importance of preserving the natural beauty, enhancing commercial amenities, and ensuring sustainable growth that respects the community's character and infrastructure capacity. And some of those themes included, preserving natural beauty, making sure that your infrastructure was adequate, preference for commercial, limiting residential development, having height restrictions, public access and amenities, and sustainable growth. Any questions before I move on to the next question, which is, which building height range do you find most appropriate? So we hit, next one, please. So for Waterfront 1, and for all of them actually, we had the 1 to 2 stories, the 3 to 5 stories, 6 to 10, and above 10. I did hear some comments afterward that it would have been nice to have like the 1 to 3 that felt that, or people would have been more inclined to go with 3, but not necessarily all the way to 5. So that's just anecdotal. So you can see for Waterfront 1, heavy preference for 1 to 2 and 3 to 5 stories. In Waterfront 2, again, the same thing, 1 to 2 stories and 3 to 5. And for the US 19 corridor, thanks Ashley for keeping up with me. You see the 3 to 5, so there's little higher tolerance for taller buildings. 1 to 2 is also popular. The 6 to 10 gets a little bit more favor. And I think that also the above 10 was also higher than in the other zones. And for the next one is the other comments, and I pretty much just took what seemed to be coming through loud and clear. Keep the buildings low along the waterways, or for like Waterfront 1. Keep those areas low. And this one, they said for everyone's sake. So the next one was, which type of site design do you prefer? This one was a little, and we could go to the next. This was a little more difficult for people to understand what we were trying to get at. And I just created these images, and you all know all this stuff, but it's really a factor of the building site, the building footprint, and the building height, preserving view corridors and sight lines where it makes sense. And then, of course, having space available for what I'll call semi-public realm, public space, like restaurant areas and plazas and things like that. So for the whole community, so it's not just private space. So for the next, for Waterfront 1, you can see that there was preference for other, because they didn't understand. They did not understand. So we'll keep going through these.
If I could ask a question on that.
Sure.
On the other, I want to say that I saw somewhere, like it says here, but it's a provide explanation. Was that in the 700 some comments? Is that where the explanation was provided, or where was?
Yeah.
So I guess because other obviously was the most prevalent in all these
Yes.
ones.
Because they pretty much said, I want shorter buildings with more open space. Like
They don't want shorter, wider. They want shorter, narrower, is what they were kind of saying.
I guess they said they wanted shorter, wider with these things, but it's
Nice.
They basically, the way that's usually taken is they want more green areas, but they want to keep their buildings shorter. So this was
it's a little
skewed because, shorter, wider means I'm not going to have green area. I want shorter, but I want more green area.
Yeah, but and that's the way we couched it. We said, if you go with shorter, wider, you have essentially no green space or public space, and you have no view corridors because you're short and wide.
Yeah.
But they said they wanted short and wide plus the other thing, so it was a little bit more fantastical thinking.
It's a hard question to ask.
It's a hard-
who's not used to.
It is. We totally agree. But we tried it.
Yeah.
And we also had the workshop, which we'll talk about.
And that makes sense. They didn't like the fact that there was no
no
good
response
mix
for that.
option where I could have short
It
and
basically corresponds with their previous one that we want one to 3 or 1 to 2, 3 to 5 story buildings,
But still want
but
public
we
space.
want green area. And so now you're asking them to go against their previous answer,
Yeah.
and that's why they just put other, because, well, you asked me once, I answered it, now you're asking me kind of a different question, or,
But I will remark that people really provided a lot of detail. They spent time answering these. You know, when I take a test or a test,
I was
survey,
shocked at the end,
I
at
will
the
put like a period
you
because
know,
I just want to move on, right? Like
comments. I mean,
the comments were, that's why I said it's gold. I mean, it may not entirely be what you were thinking it was going to turn out to be, but you have a lot of fodder for decision making going forward. And so, and I think that what we did not have built into this due to timing was the educational piece. Really having opportunity, and we can talk about what you might do coming up. But so let's just get through these. The next one is the waterfront 2. So you can see that there is a little more tolerance for the mid-height and some more of the taller versus the shorter buildings. And then for US 19, the same thing, only just, it's almost like it starts in one location and just keeps going a little higher as you go to US 19. So for those site design, other comments, they pretty much said they oppose high-rise buildings, particularly near the waterfront. And their key themes and preferences were preservation of views and natural beauty, community character, small town feel, infrastructure, environment, balanced development, and preference for low to mid-rise buildings overall. So that's not any zone in particular. Oh no, it was. This is waterfront 1. Oh, go to the next one, Ashley.
Sorry.
Keep going. This is the waterfront 1. So keep the buildings lower, preserve sort of the feel on the waterfront, and those are the things that they preferred. For the next slide is waterfront 2. So shorter buildings that prioritize public access, views of the water, and ample public spaces. And then the themes were shorter buildings, public space and access, minimal development, current use and character, and concerns about overdevelopment. So this is really kind of just a catch-all. They pretty much were just, you know, they didn't really like the questions, so they just were getting into their whole thesis of why things should stay the way they want it to be. And then for the next one, US 19, again, these are the other comments. Shorter buildings, extensive public and green spaces, minimal new development, and an emphasis on enhancing existing infrastructure and natural beauty. And I think what they were probably just regurgitating probably what they were saying before, just throughout. For those people who chose other, it's pretty much same types of themes and preferences.
Can I ask another question? On those ones where it said shorter, mid-height, taller, did we define what mid-height was? From a story perspective? I don't think we did.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, we just had those.
I know it was
ranges
before that, obviously we had
presented.
a set of floors listed, but we didn't define what mid-height.
I think you have a question later, though, that starts to get into actual building heights and starts establishing that now? Or am I
This
on
is
a
the
different
last one.
I'm on a different one. Okay.
I mean, the one question it had, 1 to 2 stories, 3 to 5. It had like I think 4 things. Above 10 was the last
6
one.
to 10 and above.
But then we
10.
move into, short, mid-height, tall, but we didn't define what mid was.
Most people, and you garner mid-height as around 5 stories.
I mean, you can kind of
4 to
deduce from
7-ish
what you saw
It
before.
is kind of mid-height for people.
Yeah.
Anything over 7, 8 stories, they start to, okay, that's high rise. It's really not,
I mean,
but
in this context, if we were in a big city, it'd be different. People would have different
Yeah.
perceptions. But I think for here, I mean, I can only speak for what's going on in my head, like what I would think would be. But
From a developer perspective, what do you guys look at mid-height story-wise?
it kind of depends where you are. If you're in New York City, mid-height
Yeah,
is
it
10
could be very
stories,
tall, yeah.
and that sort. The definition of high rises is above 10 stories, but that's kind of an odd definition for something here.
Because it's relative.
Yeah. I can say garden style. What people consider their townhomes is up to 3 stories. So that's your low rise type stuff. 8, 10 stories and above is your high rise stuff, and anything in between is kind of mid rise.
And here the idea was to kind of get them thinking about footprint and maybe what sort of height you'd need to be able to keep those really small footprints and be able to incorporate more public space and view corridors. But, you know, but we did get some chance to talk to people at the open house, so we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so let's go on to slide 30. What types of public spaces would you prefer in the planning area? Next slide. So the river walk and outdoor market space were the most popular, followed by pedestrian zones, so kind of pedestrian only zones, and sidewalk cafe, and then children's playground, plaza, and then other. So let's go to the next slide and see what other has to say. They were, again, saying a lot of the same things, but waterfront access and facilities, natural and green spaces, beach and swimming areas, river walk, boardwalks, bike trails, recreation and entertainment spaces, commercial, social spaces, and then their sentiments. They wanted minimal change, balanced public and commercial spaces. They wanted educational and historical spaces, infrastructure improvements, and accessibility and inclusivity. The next one, 33. How do you want to be able to reach destinations in the planning area? The next slide. So boat and drive, then followed by bicycle, and golf carts up there too. And then the lower ones were in order: water taxi, shuttle, and then public transit. And if we go to the next, the other comments include walkability, bikeability. We did not include a walk option because it was kind of like implied that you're going to have to walk to get your, but that's good. There's a lot of interest in walking. Bikeability, water-based options, a shuttle, a trolley, or some types of micro-mobility, limiting motor vehicle access through things like valet parking, golf carts, and a garage. And then I thought it was interesting the wheelchair accessibility. And also later on when we talk about the pervious pavement, people said that's hard for people who have mobility issues with the sort of geo-web. So good considerations. The next is the architectural style or character that you prefer. And the next, so the fishing village won out. There, we did show that image from the street package that you guys have put together, and it has some sort of themes of fishing village themes, and people picked from those in a lot of cases. So that's probably some good information going forward. Go to the next slide. They like the idea of, having some modernness, but also traditional, of course, emphasizing the coastal and waterfront themes, protecting historical and natural elements, and creating a vibrant pedestrian-friendly environment. Specific inspirations included John's Pass, the Tampa Riverwalk, lodge-type themes, Southern charm, and Mexican style. Like I guess the architecture, like the barrel tiles and things like that. And the next question, which I think is the last one, is what resiliency techniques do you prefer? Next slide, there you go. So tree canopy, that's not a surprise. Tree canopy was high. The stormwater park and living shoreline were also high. Bioswales or rain gardens, still people favored those as well. And then pervious surfaces. Next, for the other, they like the idea of enhancing through natural barriers, such as oyster beds, mangroves, minimal human intervention, tree planting and green infrastructure, sustainable water management, and natural recreational areas, living shorelines, and botanical gardens. So that's the conclusion of the survey results. So then we had the Visioning Open House on May 30th. That was it was really open for about 4 hours because people came early and we let them in, and then they just flooded us. We were just it's like fire hose. But it was great because we were guessing 100 people, 70-something people signed in. We had those 6 info stations that we talked about. We also had people from, not officially from the MPO, but the MPO, they were there fitting bicycle helmets for free. But the real hit of the show was the stations that you can see up in the corner and the two corners where people had a chance to sort of lay out Legos and talk about trade-offs, and I'll talk about that in a
Who
second.
did Dave Mueller pay to get his picture in there?
Pardon?
Who did Dave Mueller pay to get his picture included in there? That's him at top right.
I know.
If I was paying, I wouldn't have paid for that one.
I just put a bunch of pictures on the thing and the PowerPoint put it together. So
Just because he followed the cameraman around the entire night.
Hey, I was working the door.
yes,
Working a room.
it was all hands on deck because people were just flooding in, as you guys know. So the next slide. So based on that sort of interactions, especially at the tables where people could push things around, we came up with this vision statement. And this is the initial vision statement. I won't read the whole thing. I'm sure that people were going to take a look at it and refine it, but it's something to start with. So it's Cody River Landing is a vibrant, thriving waterfront district offering enhanced community and recreational experiences for residents and visitors. It's a focal point for community life. It caters to the needs of all residents and age groups, enhancing quality of life in the community. It's well equipped to manage future growth and development, and there's a practice of environmental stewardship. So then the next one, so kind of to make a bridge between like what we heard and what might be lacking in the area, because it has been 26 years and not everything that was envisioned has been achieved. I threw this in to show like what are some common barriers to realizing a community vision. This is just generally, not looking at this location, this is general. And the first one, development regulations, lacking public-private partnerships. If your infrastructure has challenges, if there isn't good accessibility to those valued spaces that people love, public spaces, are there cultural and recreational anchors that draw people in addition to the restaurants and bars and other entertainment? Is branding and marketing an issue? Is safety, cleanliness, and property maintenance an issue? And are there economic incentives, if any, are needed? So this is really just kind of creating that bridge to the city's development policy. The next slide is the slide we showed at the open house, and it analyzes what's allowed in the planning area today, including the WOD and the other locations outside of Cody River Landing that are outside of WOD. We'll point out that during this exercise that it is possible to have 18 units per acre in the WOD because the C3 allows it and it's not constrained by the WOD. So you can, up there on US 19, you can get the 18 units per acre today. C2 is 15. If you're in the R2 two-family residential, that's dictated by your minimum lot size, so you can get 9.6 units per acre there. And in the R3, it's also 15 units per acre. So for the most part, 15 units per acre is probably the max, but there are a few of those areas along US 19 in the C3 category that you can go up to 18.
So say that again. So you say within the WOD, you can get 18?
We look.
Yes. It's governed by the master zoning.
Yep.
So
I thought WOD overrode.
now the master zoning will in terms of what is allowed, you can go up to the master zone. The WOD could exceed it, I think, if it wanted to. You can have a specialized PUD that goes over the master zone.
Yeah, but there's nothing that goes. PUD, I believe, is
Actually capped at
Be 18.
15
It's whichever is greater at the end of the day, though.
in the PUD zoning.
Yeah, if you have a PUD, you can go over your master zone.
Yeah.
In this case, the C3 master zoning is over the PUD. PUD says 15 units per acre. Master zoning says 18 units per acre. You can go to master zone.
Well, how does
think
the
when
PUD
you,
go over
I
the
think when
master
you have
zone?
PUD and it says 15, that's what you, if you're getting that, I think that's what you, it's part of the trade for the PUD, I guess. I mean, we could look
I
into
mean,
that.
that's a totally different subject, but
Yeah, but there's a lot of twists and turns in
but
your
also
code.
the WOD has a 0.6 FAR ratio too.
It's actually not the WOD, it's the
Oh, that's the
underlying,
master zoning.
it's the underlying
That
zone.
is a huge problem that
It
no
is.
one's even addressed yet.
Yeah, and we show,
So a floor area ratio, if, let's say you have 1 acre property, 40,000 square feet. A 0.6 FAR ratio means the building on it can't exceed 0.6 of 40,000, or in this case, what, 28,000?
so if you have an acre, 1 acre,
You only
you
can
can
put a
do
28,000 square foot
60%.
building on it.
60% of your site can be first floor commercial.
The
But if you,
40, you get to 40% open space on the lot. Is that
Correct.
same thing? The building have more square foot if you go higher, right? Because it's by floor.
Floor area ratio is the total.
floor area ratio is based on, it's not a building coverage, it's a floor area. So you could actually do a 2-story building,
At 20,000.
but then you just move it back and then move it up. So
Yeah.
that's really kind of a good.
So the biggest building that could be on a 1 acre lot is 28,000.
Or minus the 15-foot setbacks, and
Well, no, that doesn't count
Oh,
against
yeah,
the
no.
floor area ratio.
so it's 60%.
Yeah, it would be 60% of 40,000 square feet. That's 28,000 square feet. So that's the biggest building you can put on that, be it 1 story or 5-story. That's the biggest that can go there.
I did do a little thought exercise at home, and I didn't bring it with me, but I was laying things out to see what does it look like, because that's what we're going to need to do.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of your high rises, they do 13,000 square foot floor plates. So that, that it's the way that stacks out. So in this case, you would have a 2.5 story, 3-story building.
So in an office building per se, that's what uses
And-
FAR, right?
FAR
Yeah,
is everything.
non-residential.
Period.
Multifamily.
Period.
Well, in your comp plan, you measured residential in density.
Okay.
But
But
we
it's
should,
still,
but I think it's something we should talk about in this type of an urban environment. We probably should get to the point where we're measuring everything in FAR.
yeah, most of your,
Right.
I'll say more advanced development codes.
The only thing is the state of Florida does require you to have a density. If you allow residential, you have to show your density maximum. But that's,
Correct,
could be
but they still govern by the FAR ratio. They show your density max. So you can have 18 units per acre
or you can have
or
0.6.
FAR of 0.6 or
Right.
0.4 or whatever.
Right. But if you came in with 18 units per acre and you could go over 60% of the site, you'd have to do your building coverage.
Correct.
So it's two separate things. But it's important to note that it's either 0.6 or 18
But once
units
you
per
start
acre.
getting in mixed use, they
But you
make you go to FAR.
We just have to provide
Yeah,
for that.
it gets
I agree
complicated.
with you, but we need to write it up, because right now there's limited information regarding that. But
So in theory, I guess it's very difficult as you even get to 72 foot if you got a restrictive FAR, right?
Well, I'm giving you a 1 acre parcel. So if it's a larger parcel, then obviously that calculation changes.
Yeah.
Let's take gill dogs, because everyone loves gill dogs right now. That's a 3 acre parcel on a 0.6 FAR, is 75,000 square feet allowable. My math does right. 78. All right, my math's a little off.
It's pretty close. though.
43,560 times 3 times 0.6. 78,411.
Bean counter told you that, by the way.
So
So did you use a calculator to go off your head?
No, 43,560. I use the same thing.
Yeah.
only I use the calculator, and he's
He is a calculator.
a
Anyway,
human
but
calculator.
you're getting into mixed use though, theoretically, because that was what was proposed. So it's not, you can't necessarily go by density because there's no density in the mixed part of the mixed
Right.
use. So by theory, you're going with your FAR ratio now, and you're at 78,411 and change.
But right now, today, you just have to go by your density. So if somebody came on that 3 acre site and wanted to put 18 units or what's, that's
So
actually, that's
non-mixed
15.
use, it would be
That's actually C2, right? C2.
C2's,
So they could do the 15.
C2 is 15.
Don't,
C2's 15.
yeah, C2 is 15. So I'm saying 3 acres times 50. You could do
45.
45 units on 3 acres.
Yeah.
Of non-mixed use, because you can't mix
Yeah,
you can't,
it's proportionate.
So I guess what I'm trying to understand, I think I've understood this. So if I take a building on this 3 acre parcel or any parcel, and that building has a footprint of 60% of that parcel,
not a
Well,
footprint.
Total.
There's two measurements. There's floor area ratio. So it's area of the space, floor of your building to area of the space that you're building it
Your
on.
lot.
aren't they relatively the same though? Because
No.
you got a wall, but then you got the space inside of the wall.
No. So again,
That's why I'm confused.
the area of what you're building on is 1 acre, 40,000 square feet.
Mhm.
The building you want to put on that 1 acre is 10,000 square feet, let's say.
Well, I want to use the max. This is for the
Okay,
sake of argument.
so your maximum floor coverage of your building in entirety would be 26,000 square feet.
But if I'm at one level,
No. Period.
no, I get that. But if I'm at one level,
Then it's 20.
then I'm base footprint is the same. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, what happens-
there's other criteria
happens-
that fall into that because you're going to have impervious coverages and you're going to have setbacks and other things roll into that. So that's kind of what starts telling you, all right, is it a 2-story building? Is it? But let's say all of those other things go away and you're only worried about floor area ratio right now. The biggest building you could put on that area, 1 story, would be 26,000 square feet. Or you could do 2 stories at 13,000.
Right, I get it.
Or you
So-
could just keep doing that, but you can't exceed that number.
So your height is really governed by footprint because of the FAR. Because if you
Well, yes and no. You'll get into zoning areas where their FAR is 3-to-1, 4-to-1. And that really starts changing.
yeah,
that
ours is
calculation.
0.6. I was talking about from ours.
Yeah, ours is 0.6, but correct. So that's where you start getting your high rises because they change their FARs and everything else to allow for those high rises too. That's how Tampa has whacked out ones because
Right.
they're just trying to, and they do PUDs based off of that, and then they set their floor areas for that PUD almost for that building, and then they run it up. That's how they address those.
Mhm.
And so the final question, obviously, from a residential perspective, does or does not the FAR become a restricting factor?
It will.
Yeah, FAR is.
So it's not about the
for
number of
res-
units.
For residential, if it's strictly residential, FAR does not play into it.
If it's
That's what-
mixed use.
But when-
So bottom retail above that,
But
it's
if-
all FAR.
But if you
together.
had bottom floor retail, you would say, well, how much retail do I have? Because I can go up to 0.6, but if I go up to 0.6, I can't have all my residential. So it's proportionate.
Yeah,
So
Right.
you
they
might
start knocking down the density.
Yeah,
To account for the residential. So it's a calculation between the two. At the end of the day, the idea is you really shouldn't be exceeding 15 or 18 or whatever it is, or a 0.6.
yeah.
And then that calculation is done to make sure you don't exceed all of that put together.
Yeah. And so on a strictly residential, no mixed use, then FAR doesn't play. It's just this strictly.
Well, you do start getting into your impervious coverages and everything else. That's a whole different set of calculations.
Building coverage, that'll come into
Yeah.
play.
Yeah,
that sort of
that's a
thing.
whole
That's
different
more
set of
like
calculations.
impervious surface for sure.
Thanks.
But this is based on, so density intensity is established by your future land use map and the categories. And then that's what you do your infrastructure analysis to see that can you serve at that level. And so that's kind of like what you've said, like based on your future land use map, that's what you think that you can serve in terms of water and sewer and parks and roads and solid waste and what's the other one? Stormwater drainage. So as we go up, and we'll have to demonstrate to the state that all those services can be met, at least at the time when the building permits come in or the final local development orders.
Do we set impervious on the comprehensive land use too, or no?
We don't. Only in the the recreation open space.
Own recreation.
Mhm. But we have talked about, I think we talked about that in the context of the coastal and conservation management element of
Because that actually, again, that it can influence the going high, going wide, and the FAR and everything else. Because
Right.
once you start integrating in the impervious coverages, you're mandating the green space.
Yeah. So there's a lot of little things that sort of change your building scheme. And all those things, when you start to think about what your needs are in this area, all those will have to be assessed and understood and seeing what the dynamics are between those different regulations.
Just-
And then making them as easy to understand as possible because your code's a little complicated.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's a lot, and so when a developer comes in and they're looking at your codes, like, do they feel like they're catching everything? Do they worry that something's,
Trust me, you're not alone.
oh, okay. Well, you
Does
know.
does parking facilities take away from the FAR? Or
Well,
is
you have
that
to
free?
park- You have to park your building.
Parking is included in that.
So that's part of the square footage, the level of parking would take away from that
No, I
too.
think FAR is gross leasable area.
Yeah, correct. That's
It's gross leasable. So it's not your like your porches and
It does count against your impervious coverages, depending where it is and how it
Depending
is.
where
If
it
it's
is.
under the building, it doesn't account against your impervious. But yeah, you're right. It is gross leasable, so it wouldn't count against your FAR.
it's only like your leasable area.
And gross leasable means
Gross
always a new
leasable.
term.
All right. So if you were to rent a space, and I want 1,000 square feet of space in a building, and this building's 20,000 square feet, say hypothetically, the common areas, and let's say it has parking garages and everything else, the lobby when you walk in, that's part of your gross leasable. You actually pay for it as a renter, but it doesn't count against the developer because the FAR is based on the 1,000 square feet that you can rent and give to another person.
it's like common area, if you will.
Yeah, your common area is part of your gross leasable.
You
It's
can
also
kinda
your
think about-
parking. It's also your utility areas, your common area bathrooms, anything that really makes the building operate is part of the gross leasable. The net rentable is what you are actually in your space.
You can also think about it in terms of the gross leasable and also the density are the things that have impact potential relative to your services, right? So how many bedrooms or how many residences you have or how many restaurants with chairs and consumption of water and need for wastewater treatment. And so, but yeah, the gross leasable is essentially the places where the people occupy as opposed to where the car occupies.
Well, so in a restaurant, but that's not gross leasable, right? Or is that is?
It
It's
is.
net. A restaurant would be net leasable to the tenant, not gross leasable.
Because the operator of the restaurant,
Because it would be a lease within the walls, so the restaurant itself is net leasable.
No, but as far as the development form, you're looking at the leasable
It would be
area.
included. The net leasable is included in the gross square footage of the building. But
Well, there's gross leasable area, and then that's what we use in for growth management, gross leasable, as opposed to net. I mean, that's a
yes,
whole
you're
other,
looking at the whole building.
the whole building where there's leasable space, as opposed to like that net that you're talking about. This is the piece that renter is paying
But
versus.
the net leasable is what counts against your FAR because it's not. It wouldn't fall under the parking or the other components.
Gross leasable, parking's not leasable.
Actually, it is leasable.
Well, it is now, but back in the day, like it was just a parking lot.
is there like a cheat sheet, Cliff's Notes or something?
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we
there's-
could-
Yeah, 25 years. I've still been looking for one.
Why have you not created one yet?
There's something we can find that has.
There is items that kind
Yeah.
of define.
I'd love to have a little reference to be able to keep that
Right,
straight.
it's a lot to know. and
Thanks for
every-
the.
And every community is different, too, so, except for the density and intensity of Florida. Okay, so the question here was, how do the community preferences align with adopted regulations? So the next slide is the preliminary recommendations to what is the community's vision. There's a lot of things that the community would like to see. Improvements within Cody River Landing. There's also a sensitivity to height and mass and access to the water and view corridors. So looking at your comprehensive plan, your land development code, and also creating some design guidance to, so as development comes in, you're making sure that you're checking the boxes on those quality of life things or design things, aesthetics, environmental considerations. All those things are well considered and vetted and go into the development approval process. So the next steps, in a nutshell, refine the vision statement, and then for the contract that I have right now with the city, we're developing a scope outline. So essentially, what we've come up with so far, and I'm about ready to finish it, and I showed the city manager the other day, is we would do a regulating plan that sort of assesses all that. We're talking about the potential for transfer development rights, so somehow creating opportunities for waterfront property owners that are maybe to keep, like an incentive to keep their properties low, and then transferring that additional density where you have some increase in your standards over to the places where there's more tolerance for taller buildings. So that's not a slam dunk, just go write it tomorrow. You have to kind of think through a lot of things like we just talked about. Getting some maps out, and also I think community engagement's an important part of that as well. But there's regulating plan, and that plan tells you how you're going to update your comp plan and how you're going to update your land development code, including some design guidance. And then the community engagement, that's part of that. In its most basic level, you have to do public involvement at your public hearings. So before you adopt any ordinance, you'll have to have those 3 public hearings: planning and zoning, and then the first reading, second reading. But what would be ideal, because I think there is a real interest in the community to be able to understand some of these dynamics that everybody's been talking about. So I thought, what if we could do like a private development and a public finance sort of 101, where we have somebody from like the realty industry that could come in and talk about, well, what goes into sort of like what we were talking, Dave and I were talking about with, when you have a property and it's very like an acre and it's very expensive, sometimes it doesn't work out. It's not financially feasible to build a small building because you'll never get a return on your investment, right? So then you're not going to do anything. So you have to have that sort of balance between like what you pay for a property and what sort of rents or value that you're going to get out of it. The next part would be things about how do cities pay for things. They pay for things like they have taxes, ad valorem taxes. Sometimes they pay for things because they, they're able to increase the value of their tax base, and also they may have things that they have to buy that impact where you can spend your money. So sometimes you have like really high priorities, but you don't necessarily have enough money left over to do, the fancy plaza where the open market is on Sundays. So I think some educational process would be nice there so that people could touch and feel the information like we did at the open house, but a little bit more focused. I know you probably have some thoughts maybe on how that might work out in a practical application, but that's just an idea. Oh, and also importantly, I missed over, we haven't talked to anybody out on or at least I haven't, or staff maybe hasn't, anybody in Cody River Landing, in the waterfront 2, or in the US 19 corridor. What do those landowners have to say? What do the people who would be interested in investing there have to say? The property owners in general, agencies. What does DOT have to say? DEP, Department of Commerce. What do they have in mind for this area to help reduce the impact potential as much as possible? So I think that sort of fact finding is really integral to doing sound planning. And I think too, because the community didn't grasp this, or did not grasp, they're not on board with a lot of intense development out here. I think you're going to need to spend some more time talking to the community and bringing them along, like to develop an understanding of what the dynamics are, because it feels to me that there's some nice things that the community wants, but how do you get there? And I don't know the answer to that right now, and I don't know that anybody else really knows exactly how do you do that. But it's a village sort of thing that I think it has to come together. That's my thoughts, and that's it. That's all I have. So I'm ready for any questions.
Mr. Chair, I have one on the skipped questions.
The skipped, the other.
As you went through all the questions, they were all around 120, 140
Oh.
skipped or whatever. So
When
when
people
I,
just skipped over them.
yes, I understand
Yes.
that. But when were you able to constitute a skip? So if I entered the survey, I mean, you have to at least answer one question to consider it skipped. Because if I went in a survey and I think it started out, it wanted a comment at first, right? And let's say I got out of it. Is that a skip?
The only one that you absolutely had to answer was if you lived in the city, like what street you live on,
Mhm.
or you didn't live in the city, or other. So that was the only mandatory question.
So they just basically left the question blank. They just went to the next one.
somebody, maybe they got in and they said, I don't really feel like writing. They skip it. They skipped over. In a lot of cases, the other people didn't have anything else to add, so they skipped it. Not everybody answers every question.
So really, once they pass that first comment, that's probably the only time it really matters, because you couldn't go
You
any.
could skip the first one. You could skip. You could just skip all the way to the end.
Skip right to the end.
Oh,
and
just
not
skip the whole
answer
thing.
anything else
You can
other than
skip-
live in
you
the
can
city.
skip all-
And basically, not taking a
questions you
survey.
put in- as long as you put in your address and hit enter, then you're good.
Okay, that's my question, I guess. So really, the people that skipped, they could skip it all, and they didn't take a survey at all. They put their address in, right?
Right.
I mean, generally people will skip one or two
Yeah.
questions, or sometimes they get a fat finger and it just goes right by, or they don't understand the question, so they just skip it to the next one and go through.
Yeah, not every. Sometimes if you don't feel like you have anything to add, you don't agree with the question, whatever, you could just skip it over.
Or, hypothetically, well, they didn't say 1 to 3 stories. I would have picked 1 to 3 stories. I'm not answering this question.
Well, and I think that's what we heard.
Yeah.
Some people said,
Mhm.
I would have answered that question, but I didn't see the range that I agreed with. There wasn't one for me.
That's the reason I asked, because the skips were all around the same amount. Seemed like they were all 120, 130, or 40. So it's around the same. It's almost like the same people. I know it wasn't like that, but it just was an oddity, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious how it was
But I
kind
will
of.
tell you, this survey was very well responded to.
That-
You know, very well.
To put it into context, if that survey had the same response rate in Clearwater, they would have had 40,000 people answering.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal response rate.
And they wouldn't. You know, I did Pinellas County 2 years ago. We did a sustainability action plan. It was a very big push. It was a lot of bold ideas. 1,200 people. So it's a county of what, 800,000? I don't know where they are at this point. 1,200, and we were celebrating that. We were like, wow, we got 1,200.
Yeah,
A few years ago,
to
we
get
said-
a 20% response rate is ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, comparatively to other cities and whatever, I mean, our election, even if it's as low count as it is, it's around 18%, right? Which is 10%, I think, is the average.
And think about that.
For municipal, that's good.
Yeah.
And that's an election.
Right.
That's people understand that.
So,
For
no,
this,
we have a lot of people that more than normal would actually get involved.
yeah. Well, I can see obviously, but it's I'm saying it's not a slouch rate of responses. It's very high.
Even to have 100 people show up, it was actually surprising.
That's probably more impressive than anything.
I honestly thought we'd get like 30 to 40 people, and that would be it. To hear it's 100, it was
Yeah.
very.
No, that number was the
So
most
what I
staggering.
heard when we first started this, and someone professional said, I thought you were going to get 50 surveys back, like they were going to be happy with 50.
Mhm.
But when people hear 766, it's like their mind blows. It's so high. And that workshop as well, for a community of this size, for there to be that many people who came out is really a testament to either the Coconut Telegraph, people just, talking to people and getting them to come, or just a real interest in the area. That's the big thing, really.
I'd like to commend everyone who was involved with it. It really a phenomenal response, a good turnout from the citizens. You actually had good comments too, because a lot of times you get really dumb comments from these things. It was really a well-run thing all the way around.
And a lot of, I was expecting a lot of fresh comments,
Yeah. Usually,
but they weren't. They were really thoughtful comments.
Yeah.
They like, well, this is what I.
usually you get the
prefer.
Port Richie sucks. Click.
Right.
That doesn't really help you very much.
I think the mailer helped a lot too,
Yeah.
doing the mailer and the Nixle.
You could see those
And-
points where
Mhm.
you release something and there'd be a spike.
And Sal bombing me left and right
And-
on Nixus helped a
And,
lot
and
too.
as I watched those coming through, I was always waiting for it to slow down, and it didn't. it never slowed down. We had spikes, but even that very last day, there was, the bar chart showed a lot of people that were the last couple days. There were still people out there trying to take the
Just out of
circuits.
curiosity, did you have any kind of stats on when was the peak? Like, was it the last day we had more people engaged? And
It seemed like it was like once a week, like after we had our meetings. And we sent.
We'll see if this lets me in. It's always telling me I can only have 2 devices. It's like I have more than 2 devices.
and then like if we knew the day that the mailer hit,
Just asked her that. Like the specific day, I'd have to look, but I don't remember the
I'd
day.
imagine you probably get a spike.
Like when the Nixle went out.
Sheets and yeah.
it'd be interesting to
There
see.
Because I know Tammy was watching that as well and would say that
So I can tell you the peaks. Well, this is just, I don't know what it's doing. It's aggregating them, but it's like May 6th, but I don't know if it's that day or if it's just grouping them. May 6th is when it started, so there was like less than 50. On May 13th, whatever range that's including, there was a little under 250. On May 20th, it looks like 200. May 27th was 250. And then this last week was 55. June 3rd, 55 responses.
So yeah,
I think your mailer went out the 27th, because didn't it go out
I
like,
think it went out the week of the 20th.
yeah, it went out. Actually, it went out that Friday before the 30th. So it was the week.
Before Labor Day.
Yeah, it hit like Friday and Saturday of the week before the open house.
well, if we could tie the Nixles that went out, when the mailer went out, to volume, it'd be nice to know from a communication perspective what works
Yeah.
better, what doesn't.
And that it shows me that someplace. I just right here. It's like a summary.
Yeah.
Maybe over here it would be. But as I mentioned, I think when I wrote to everybody on staff and the team and everything, it was best practice. Whatever we did collectively worked. And so, in fact, people in the industry that I've mentioned this to, they're like, "What did you do?" Like they want to know because we spent a lot of money on meetings, like public meetings, and maybe you get 5-6 people. I mean, how many people participated in your CRA plan?
Less than 15.
So,
Well,
I
city
always-
residents or non-city residents?
I know.
We had a
I mean, I
large
hear about-
contingent of
I hear
non-city
about
residents
these,
there.
$100,000 public meetings because a lot of
Yeah.
times they're very expensive to put on. But you have your consultant team outnumbers the public that shows up.
Mhm.
What have you really captured? So there's a lot of interest now in this, the surveys, the geofencing. So people drive through an area and they get like a ding to take a survey. There's other ways that give you more value. But I think I think the idea from the club having this open for like 4 weeks, having it before and after the open house, I mean, it really shows that. And I think we probably got a little bit of bump after the open house. Some people said they waited to come to the open house to learn before they took the survey. So
Which
there
makes
was,
sense. Yeah.
mhm.
It would have been really positive if we could have had a form of the open house before we opened up the survey. I mean, not exactly the same, but more
Yeah.
from the education.
Education, yeah.
Yeah, because I think
I agree.
that's, what I was hearing back, what I synthesized from what I was hearing back was people weren't understanding what we were asking them. I mean, they understood what we were asking them, but they weren't understanding what we were asking them. Because, they were expecting to see, well, we wanted to vote. I mean, this is how we wanted to vote on how tall a building or how many people or what were the uses. And when they got to the survey, it wasn't what they expected. And so they were trying to match what their expectations were to the questions, and they didn't line up to what those expectations were.
well, they did vote in a way. I mean,
Yeah.
they made their opinions known to what
Yes.
it was. I think, like you said, some of them were expecting, all right, this is a referendum vote.
Right.
So it's almost like, okay, this is an April referendum vote, and we say yes to 5-story or above, and it goes through, and no, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's what they're used to,
Yeah.
and that's what everything's directed towards. This was a pulse,
Yeah.
and a pulse survey.
So I remembered something I was like a big reveal that we did speak about at the city council meeting, but the results from that table, those stations,
Right.
which was in a separate document. So I'm looking for that now.
Yeah, and that I think, again, there were people there that I had talked to before, and I think they had already answered the survey questions, came up with a different insight into what they would have said in the survey if they would have done that first. Because what was coming out of that tabletop exercise was a little bit different than what we were seeing, I think,
Yes.
in the survey.
So, and I'll share this with you. But Station 4, there was an overwhelming preference for Waterfront 1 for enhanced dining, entertainment, and shopping. Low-rise buildings up to 3 stories, consistent with the existing character, are preferred to maintain small-town charm of Port Richey. Zone or Waterfront 1 is a place for both families and adults. The streetscape and infrastructure improvements recently designed for this zone should be implemented. In Waterfront 2, an extension of the dining and entertainment in Zone 1 is preferred along the riverfront. For the US 19, residential development up to 10 stories along US 19 are acceptable. The mid-rise development here should not obstruct views of the Gulf. Recreational water sports activities, including improvements for the boat ramp at Nix Park, is desired. There's also a strong sentiment to better utilize Waterfront Park as a community park. Parking is much needed there in the area. There is a general sentiment to have a multifunctional parking garage for cars, golf carts, and bikes on the west side of US 19 to primarily serve the dining and entertainment in Waterfront 1. The improvements to the existing boat slips and new slips should be considered as part of any private site and public infrastructure improvements. There is an opportunity to create a downtown Port Richey or Port Richey Main Street around Grand Boulevard and River Gulf Road to leverage branding, economic development, and funding opportunities. 2 more. Safe and pedestrian and vehicular crossings across US 19 connecting Waterfront 1, Waterfront 2, and US 19 are desired for a more connected and robust Cody River Landing. The option to have a pedestrian overpass gateway across US 19 near the bridge was expressed. And then to consider water taxi facilities to further connect the Cody River Landing waterfront to other communities. So there really was an opportunity for people to sort of compromise and make trade-offs that if they could protect this area, they would be more inclined to accept more, especially
Yeah,
on
everyone
US
seems. I mean, they want to protect the waterfront, make it a small town downtown fishing village. They almost don't care what you do on Route 19. I mean,
I was a little surprised with the survey comments because it was a little protective of, but I think that was not understanding how infrastructure could keep up with growth because there's a lot of growth at Pasco. It always takes a long time, especially road improvements, 10 years, 20 years. You're dealing with a lot of congestion while you're waiting for roads. And roads, they always fill up. So I think that was the rub with people along US 19 is that it's already pretty congested.
yeah. So go ahead, go 10 stories. What do we care?
So, but yeah, I think that educational opportunity that we had in a small way at the open house had material results that were different than the survey.
Good job.
Yeah,
Good job. It was a lot of work. I just want you to know, I want you to be appreciative. Like you said, that was a good budget. It was a good budget for the city. So, but I was happy to do it. I had a lot of fun. It was very exciting. The surveys coming in.
Would you do it again at the same
I need
price?
a new survey.
Would you do it again at the same price, or did you?
Oh no, I don't. Well, it depends. I have my favorite.
I saw that price. I'm like, hey, this is a good price.
Yeah.
We're going to roll with this one.
I have my favorite communities that I do special deals with, but I thought this one was important.
No, it was.
I can't do them all the time because there's only so many hours in a day.
It was a phenomenal turnout. Good results. Good everything. Really couldn't ask for more, especially putting this thing together. So
What was the price of 4 speed bumps?
Yeah. Is that what it was? Is that how much they cost?
Well, it's
Do you
two 6,000, so 12,000 before
Are you doing them like they are in Newport Richie?
on the grand.
Yeah.
The table, speed table.
One saying yes, one saying no.
I'm just shaking my head about speed.
Whatever
While
they
we're
are, I don't know
talking
if they're.
about speed tables.
I don't know if
it's
they're
funny.
I'm shaking my
sustainable.
We
head.
got all that survey and all that stuff, the same price of four speed bumps. But it's
We're gonna do 2 more.
interesting
Just
how
like-
pricing.
I didn't break this, by the way.
No,
Those are the best.
Please do. We need new ones.
that's someone else broke it. Not naming any
I
names.
had it turned off too, so
But he lives on Blue Point Drive.
5439, yeah,
Yeah.
I remember.
to be exact.
Any other
Frank?
questions for Tammy on this? None. Do I have any questions?
do we have to talk to anything about the next steps, or is that outside of the
Well,
context of this right now?
I think if you have,
It's another contract.
it is another contract, but if you have input on that,
Yeah, because she's in the process right now of putting together kind of that statement of work so we can hit the next
Okay,
part.
so there's nothing for us to do right now or anything to it, right? I mean, I guess you're putting together, like we did with the original survey,
Yeah.
she's going to put together
I'm
the
putting together an
statement
outline.
of work.
It's a really basic.
We'll comment on it and then go back and
I will
forth.
also add, and maybe Matt has forgotten about this, but I don't know.
I probably haven't. Maybe I just don't want to talk about it.
we did submit a grant to
Oh.
Department of Commerce to do more robust planning out here, which would include a regulating plan, comp plan amendments, and land development code updates for the entire area. Because it's not just Cody River Landing; this is this whole area. So I believe that
You get it?
that we
Are
asked
you
for.
announcing it tonight? We got it? Is that what you're doing?
Well, I haven't heard anything yet. So.
Oh, good.
Usually it will occur in July, August. So it's after the July, because the fiscal year starts July 1st. But we asked for $75,000. You're going to need every bit of that.
Is it a reimbursable type thing where we can start spending the money and get it back in, or
You get you
Well, no, he's thinking if we started it now.
no, you can't
Yeah,
start.
No, you
now.
can't
whatever
start
you
till
get,
get
then you can go.
Yeah,
Aren't you guys doing some kind of traffic safe streets study
Yep.
as well?
safe streets for all. Yeah,
Because that could integrate into the
Or-
comprehensive.
it will.
It's
Yeah.
more dealing with hotspot like crash locations. Like
Oh,
safety
is that what that
issues.
is? Oh, I thought that was more circulation and sidewalks and.
It's all part because you come up with pedestrian plans and
You
bike
come up with
plans.
needs. What are your
Well,
needs?
and that's why I'm saying, because we have a lot of feedback already on the circulation and the travel
Yeah.
preferences of our citizens.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That would work in nicely to the Safe Streets grant and then circulate off of
Yeah.
that as well. So
Well, there's
everything's kind of coming together at a good time.
there's an amazing linkage in all these things right now. So, but I think going back to kind of that next step, where there's actually probably three different things that I see we're doing here. One is we have to keep focus on the greater planning of all those areas that are the waterfront, 1, 2, and US 19, and that's kind of what that grant was aimed at. Was while some of this was started because of a developer, we can't plan on a single developer doing everything that needs to be done in those areas. And so
You should go under the assumption that a single developer will not be doing it.
exactly, and that's exactly what I'm saying is that we can't rely upon that. And even if there is a single developer doing a lot, they're not going to do everything. And so we have to start planning for how those areas get redeveloped. And that's kind of a little bit longer term issue, I think. And again, that's why that grant is a excellent opportunity. So we don't have to pay for that, like they pay for that part. The other two areas or issues are a little bit more, I guess, closer term. And that really is dealing with the developer it's at hand, looking at some of those parcels. And so that's where, a land use change, land use plan change in the near term is something we have to deal with. And then also what changes in our land use code that is reflective of what that land use change is. And so where we have the bigger planning issue that's probably going to take a lot longer and allows us to engage a lot better. The The other two are probably not going to be as robust of engagement. But I think we would not be doing, the area a service if we didn't sit down with those existing landowners and stakeholders in the waterfront. I mean, and I've talked to most of them already, and I know they have something to say about all this that we need to listen to, because I think it's the piece it really is missing in what is up there. Although you might say that they may have had some input, but we really haven't talked to them about the impact of different types of development on their businesses. And I will say that there is a wide range of beliefs there by the people that are down there. I mean, and it may be even wider than what we've seen in this survey. So it's going to be an interesting process that we have to figure out how to do that, do it quickly, do it within the
Here's a very important part, and I agree wholeheartedly. You need their input as to what they want. I guess they probably have very varying ideas of what they want in that area.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is what you essentially do in one parcel of that area, you're doing for that whole area. It's one master PUD. So, you can grant variances or do whatever you want for one parcel. You're a lawsuit away from granting them to all.
Yeah.
Essentially. So the I know there's a rush to decide, but you have to decide very carefully and get those landowners' inputs, because I know, the feedback I've gotten is they weren't even aware of what could potentially be there, and some of them weren't necessarily on board with it to that extent. So getting their feedback and saying, yes, this is what we want is very important. But also remember that what you do for one, you're doing for all down there. That there is no, I can only give to you. And you know it as well as anybody. You give to one, you are giving to all of them. And you're likely giving to across the street, across 19 as well, into Waterfront too.
So that actually brings a question I had on the PUD. And let's talk about, what the WOD consists of. And then you have that, which Gill Dogs is within, but then the parcel that's almost 5 acres is not.
I saw that here that it was.
The maps are wrong.
Okay, I didn't think it was.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's not part
that's
of
where I
it.
was
I've
getting.
had to put
Okay.
all these disclaimers and things like
So my question is, hypothetically, for the Gill Dog properties, which is obviously the thing that's what's going on right now, right? So you've got some in a WOD, some out, but it's all being one package together.
Right. From
a PUD perspective, could you create a PUD for just those Gill Dog properties, right? Again, there's the limitation of 5, which is something else we need to address if we drop that down to lower or whatever. But let's keep it 5. Let's say there's, I don't know what the total is, maybe 7 acres or something like that, 8 acres. Could you define that as a PUD that kind of sits on top of the other PUD, or do you have to modify the WOD to take that out to then?
There's only one PUD, right? It would be,
You would have to take Gill Dogs out of the PUD.
there's a PUD.
Well, WOD is.
WOD is a PUD.
No, it's an overlay
It's an
district.
Well, it's an overlay
Yeah,
district.
overlay district.
Oh, that's so it's not PUD. So then that's maybe another question. But so I guess 2 parts. Could we create a PUD for the Gill Dogs properties with the waterfront overlay district now?
You'd have to take the Gill Dogs out of the overlay district.
Well, no,
Why?
you can do a PUD in the overlay district, but the issue is our PUD requirements is it has to be contiguous. It has to be all
And
touch.
separated by a road.
Well, you could just do 2, and then you could link them with a development agreement somehow. Like, because what you'll probably, if you go through the scheme that we're talking about, keeping the one area.
But individually, because you have the 4 point whatever, which is in C3.
And I'll
then
go
you
down
only have
one
another-
further.
But you could have.
I'm the next developer.
You can have.
You made special arrangements for him, creating his own PUD. Where's mine?
Yeah.
And you will lose.
Yeah, that's the whole purpose of PUD is negotiation with the.
No. The judge will say, no, you have to now treat every further developer the same as you treated this developer.
Right.
So Seaside then becomes its own PUD.
Well, and go to the next step, but that is Seaside They buy that and they buy another parcel, let's say.
And you allow us to
Separately, they
link them.
don't have.
Now I know own everything on the interior and I own Seaside. Well, that all is now a linked PUD.
Right.
You got to be careful with what you're going down the road because I've been there with my lawyers. You're one step away from the next guy coming in and doing whatever the hell he wants.
Well, so that's
But you're
contrary
always
to,
constrained by infrastructure
Yes.
and compatibility.
well, so that's contrary to what I've asked
Well,
and been told.
this, I mean, again, let's go further. This is non-compatible with their overlay district. So now I can do a non-compatible use to the overlay district, which gives me a PUD, which means I
Well,
can do anything I want.
There's a lot of thinking that needs to go. This is
This
not,
has to be extraordinarily
it does.
careful.
It has to be, just like we're doing right now. All
You,
of these
you
different
actually want to
angles.
get a land use attorney in on this big time to make sure you're doing it properly if you want to go down that road. Because there are a lot smarter people than you out there.
Yeah, well, sure.
And they're coming, they will be right behind it. And you, anytime you make a special exception, especially linking and breaking things out and doing special things, the next guy's right behind you.
Right. And so I get all that. And so the reason for the question is a big part of being able to accommodate some of these things that allow for this is, like you said, if you open up one, you open up for all, right? Well, what is the legal way that doesn't get us into that situation where we do have some flexibility to work with a certain piece of property and a developer to do something that doesn't translate to another? And so
you
that's,
can have, right now you have a max that's constraining you. In order to increase it, there's got to be some performance for that. Like you don't just give away all that density or intensity that you build into your comp plan or whatever you're going
Right.
to amend. So this is where performance needs to occur.
but to his point, if we do that for one, somebody comes in and says,
Yeah.
well, I want to do it over here too.
Then they're going to have to do performance.
Performance.
So
And
it's
you have
either
a list.
you're going to have to open it up to go above that and accept performance, or leave it where it is and say no performance. Everyone's on the same plate. You start getting into, and depending what the performance is, it has to be very specific because a judge, think of it down the road, a judge is going to look at it. Okay, what is the performance? Because the same performance so if the performance is very little, the judge will say, well, you can't treat the next guy any worse than you treated this
Right.
guy or woman. I don't want to get
Sure.
person, whatever we're talking about. The performance and the leeway that you provide has to be either very, very detailed and hard to replicate. And you can't do undue burden or anything like that. Or you have to leave it where it is, or just raise it all at once and open it up for everybody.
Which obviously is not the answer.
And where you are right now, with the regulations that you have, you can build tall, and you can't make the FAR is constraining for sure. But how do you create an incentive to keep that waterfront one area very, very much like the community wants it? You've got to make those property owners, you have to give them some way, an incentive to shift that extra density that they have someplace else. And that also is going to require, and it's done. There's TDR programs that work in historic districts or downtowns if you're trying to preserve some resource. But that's also something that needs, because there's a few different ways that you can set that up and how you're going to administer it. And is it going to be market based, or is it going to be, there's a lot of things that have to be thought out. But the important thing, in my opinion, is how do you keep those waterfront one property owners whole as they help the community achieve the vision that they'd like to see outstudied. So they're, they have something very valuable there. So how do you take that value and put it somewhere else? So
Well, the problem that they have something valuable, but depending on what the code and what they can do with that
right now,
determines that the valuation,
They're
right? So they can't do anything with
Right.
it. It's not very valuable at all.
so at least it's good in a way, because in communities that have given away a lot, you don't have any room to play with.
There's a balance.
Yeah.
I was waiting for you guys to see if you're done.
I'm good.
Well, someone else to speak, and I just wanted to make sure you guys were done talking before I let him speak. Name and address, please.
Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive. I really enjoy this conversation. It's very enlightening.
One of the things, and it sounds like you guys have a challenge here, you also have to consider the existing structures down there. For example, catches. Maybe at some future point in time, they want to erase that building and do something else, because now you don't have its highest and best use. With this new structure, you need to take that into consideration as well. At some point in time, maybe Whiskey Joe's or Hooters will want to change that because the value of the property's changing. And now they find a highest and best use and want to redevelop it in some other capacity. So you guys have a challenge there. Good luck. Thank you.
I'll cue off of that though. Highest and best use for a property is always defined. Well, it's static to the extent of the codes that exist and
Parameters.
the parameters that the land falls under. So the highest and best, I run into this a lot actually with landowners. You know, they have 30 acres, they have a FAR where they can go up to 0.8 and all kinds of other stuff, and they have a dinky little 20,000 square foot retail thing. They come to me, what can I do with that for highest and best use? And then I go and I, lay out, look at all the codes, get the architects to look at it, and we'll put together, but it's always up to the code maximum. So, for instance, catches, is it underutilized right now? Maybe, maybe not. To highest and best use, but at the best you could ever go with current codes would be a building of mixed use, 15 or 18 units per acre, and a FAR of 60. So its highest and best use is probably right at it now for a high-end restaurant right on the water with marina. That is one of the highest and best uses as we sit. What would change that highest and best use would then be, if you substantially change the code to, and let's say 20-story buildings and, whatever else. Okay, well now, people with a lot of money are coming in, knocking down catches and putting up 20 scored because that becomes its new highest and best use. So they're static in and of themselves, and you can get a higher end restaurant in there, or maybe it goes to its highest and best use of, let's say Port Richey and Newport Richey become the new Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, where all the actors want to come here, and then you start building in those condos. That's the new highest and best use. But right now it's probably fully utilized for what it is and what's allowable under current code.
We also
I
have
can imagine thinking of catches in that big parking lot. So what if there was this additional bonus that they could get through this new land use scheme that they could actually build on top of they could, in addition to their point, maybe they have 0.6 right now. I don't know what their FAR is.
Well, they have a separate thing. They could possibly build right now on that.
Well, they have to have parking.
They're capped at podium. They're capped at 40.
What?
Podium parking.
Oh, yes, I'm saying.
Yeah, they just build a house.
So there would be an incentive there for podium parking, and then you could have an agreement to say, well, the city would like to have 100 spaces or whatever the spaces are. You know how they have the agreements with you're building a building, you've got podium parking, and we would like to have an agreement that we're going to get this much that's good for public parking. And usually it's paid parking though.
Well, I mean, when I was on council and Guild Dogs was looking at the Kaiser thing, there was going to be a public parking component on that of 100 spaces, something like that, based right off the waterfront, and that was going to be the agreement with it that it went through. Obviously,
You did something like that?
yeah, they did that. You did that with Kaiser now, I think. On your, I don't want to bring you in.
They gave us the property because they were just going to have asphalt parking. They
Yes.
gave us the property as long as we would build the 330 spots.
And then you have the public-private agreement for public parking. Yeah, I didn't mean to bring you in on that.
No, that's fine. It was their property that they gave.
Yeah.
So let's bring it back.
Why do you let us go tangential?
I'm sorry. I'm getting this evil stare from the clerk over here that I'm not running a very efficient meeting right now. So I apologize. But it's a very interesting topic. And again, this,
It's a rich topic.
yes.
It's going to require a lot of brains. I don't think we should rush it, Eddie.
No, I think that's the challenge with this is to do it right, but to do it right in a way that we meet goals that help transform the community in the direction the residents and the elected officials want it to go. And I think again, as we're kind of putting together that plan, we're trying to be sensitive to what outside influences there are, but also to do it in a way that's going to get the biggest benefit for the residents. And it's a difficult thing to do. I know I put a lot of stress on our
like
planner
somebody
for
who's
that.
going to who puts together the regulations or the parameters. You've got to figure out how much. It's just not like an arbitrary number. What works? How do you calibrate those sites? What's needed to make the project work financially? What you can handle in terms of infrastructure? All that stuff has to go into turning that dial. Do we have more over here? Not reduce, but incentivize keeping it low flung over here. What do you need to be able to transfer over here? What does this look like? So it's a lot of
There's a lot.
nuance there.
Okay, so we'll be looking forward to
The outline. It's just an
yes.
outline.
Yes, as soon as possible.
I
So
don't
the
have-
idea is the outline comes back to us like the survey did. We kind of talk it through and see what,
Very good.
and then send it to council and say we want to spend a bunch of your money.
A lot of money.
I think I'm going to try to create a little bit of not a menu approach, but just some different scenarios, perhaps. I'm going to have some ideas, I'm sure.
I think one of the most unique things that we have, and one of the best things we have, is the total engagement that we have. If in developing this further, if that momentum stays with the amount of people involved and interested, I mean, you can
The
have.
trick is, again, I work with the DOT a lot. They're all about everything's community centric, and they're about building relationships because you want to have people engage now, and you want them to engage in the future, right? And they want it to be a good thing. So you need to show that the responses that you got back are meaningful, and that people will continue to be engaged. It's not just a one-off, right? Now you have a responsibility to engage, which is a great problem to have, because I think an engaged community is a much tighter, more respectful, and just harmonious community. They're going to have issues. People are going to disagree, but at least you asked. And so many people wrote in this survey, "Thank you for asking. Thank you for asking me this question."
Yeah, a lot of and I don't want to speak for you, but a lot of problems planners have is they don't know what the community wants because the community doesn't tell them what they want. So they all go down that path, and then it's like, oh, we didn't want that. Where were you? Done.
Ready? We move on to the next. Comprehensive land use plan update, conservation and coastal management objectives and policies review. We get through this like in 10 minutes.
I hope so because I got to leave at 6.
This is a really easy one. It's just the goal 5. Do you see it?
Not really.
So I added it's community and partner engagement. Look, we're just rolling right into the same theme. So our goal is to actively involve our community and partners in learning about and addressing issues related to conservation and coastal management to foster a culture of preparedness, resiliency, and sustainability. So essentially we have 2 parts. The objective CCM51 is community engagement, and then after that is more partner related. So we had last time a long list that was from a lot of different research that I had done. So I kind of took that and consolidated it by topic. So if there's anything that you see here that could use a little bit more detail, or you just want to change it in some manner, but I think it's a good starting point for different ways that you can, especially related to all the topics, flooding, community rating system, hazardous waste and education. So all the topics are there, I think. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. And then going down to the next one is community partnerships. So those are the different groups, including the county or the different environmental agencies that you would collaborate with to achieve your conservation and coastal management vision.
Vertical Oyster Garden Initiative.
Yeah, I had to look that up.
Yeah, so have you heard about how they're collecting oyster shells from the restaurants? Yeah. And also they use those oyster shells. They probably like dry them and get all the gunk out of them, but then they put them in the big bags and they use them to create the living shorelines. But they also have these, I guess they probably like little seed starters, and they just grow little farms, I suppose. But you know, oysters are they clean the water, right? So.
I apologize, guys. I've got a commitment I've got to go to. So.
If you want, we can do this. I know that you probably have your water supply plan that you need to discuss.
No, I don't have a water supply.
Not tonight, but maybe can we table this and come back?
I'm fine with that.
I can say that.
So we have to get something to the state in July on this, or
So July 6th is our deadline.
Mhm.
We can be late. I mean, you just right now.
It's the 20th.
Yeah, so-
It's the 20th of June.
well, I wanted to kind of work through what the elements were to get this to the state, because I thought
So the big
we were,
thing that's lacking right now is
It's got 4 anyways. Okay.
yeah.
water supply facilities work plan, which is a 10-year plan to be able to. So, and that I think can be a very simple, almost like a table
Yeah.
with some policies. You know, we don't have to make it robust, and if the
Mhm.
state wants more, we can always provide more later. So that's probably the biggest thing. Another one is, and I know you're probably starting budget discussions right now, and maybe we wait on this one. It's the capital improvements element, which is a schedule of capital improvements that are related to meeting your level of service standards. So it doesn't have to be everything you're doing, but those things, like you say, we need to have X water, whatever.
Yeah.
How are you programming for that in the next 5 years, if it has to be in 5 years, because it's a 5-year program.
Yep.
So those are the two big pieces. I need to put together just the beginning parts of this, the data and analysis, and I've been working with Carl Roth. Is that his name? He provided some data that I was lacking regarding resiliency?
Yep.
No, sustainability.
Sustainability,
One of those
resiliency. Yeah.
sustainable land management in some regard. So I'm going to incorporate that, but that's the stuff that we don't adopt. It's just data that we use to make us help us do policies. So I could probably use one more meeting. Sounds like you could use one more meeting, and we can come back and just finish this last little piece of
So
policy.
then once that
So
once it moves on from here,
Okay.
after we say, yeah, we like all this.
Planning and Zoning Board,
Mhm.
which Planning and Zoning Board typically requires a 30-day review period, but that really in code is only related to planned unit development. I don't know if it's just tradition or custom to give them 30 days to review something, but you know, if you want to give them 30 days, we'll just be that much later getting into the
Right.
state. Typically what happens with the state, I mean, and I think writing a letter to let them know that, hey, we're on the cusp of this, we're getting ready to, because a lot of places are behind, including Newport. But what will happen if they want push came to shove, they could stand in the way of grants, state grants, and also they could prevent you as the city from amending your future land use map. So if you wanted to do something in Cody River Landing, but if a private developer came in, they could still go through the process of amending the future land use map. So there's those little sticks that they have, but they won't pull the sticks out. I mean, I'm just guessing.
Well, I think if we're upfront with them and let them know that we're doing a very good job, extensive job doing this.
Yeah, no. Well, I also said that in the grant application, because that's the same entity that gives the grant. So I wanted to make sure that they knew we were being diligent about that requirement.
Okay.
All right, so when do we want to meet again?
Two weeks. Is that the 11th?
2 weeks from today is the 4th. So that's no problem.
Yeah, probably the week of the 4th, we're not going to have a meeting.
I am not going to be here on July 4th, but you all feel free to have a
Yeah,
meeting all
that
week.
week I'm blocked out that week.
So the week of the 8th,
That's good.
the 11th.
I prefer Thursdays at 4 o'clock. That's
Okay. We can do
So
that.
the 11th is what you're looking at?
Yep.
Looks good on my end.
Excellent.
Alrighty. How about you? How's your calendar?
Every day standard.
Okay. Is there any other business to come before the committee? Didn't think so. With that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
You don't need a motion, but
But I'm going to entertain one.
you can entertain when you want. You're not going to get one because you don't need one.
Adjourn.